Colby Covington isn't a well-liked man in the UFC. You can add Tuivasa and Volkanovski to the list of people who hate the fighter as well. Let's get into their back and forth as well as other UFC news making the rounds. First up, Tuivasa isn't a fan of rats. This weekend at UFC 272, Tai Tuivasa wants to see Colby Covington cop a beating, and it's likely that he isn't alone. Widely considered the UFC's most hated man, controversial US star Covington will headline against his foe and former close friends Jorge Masvidal in a mouth-watering grudge match on Sunday. On Fox News' Fight Week, Aussie stars Tuivasa and Alexander Volkanovski discussed the bout, where Tuivasa didn't hide his true feelings at all. The number 3 ranked heavyweight star said that he hoped Covington would get his head caved in. Tuivasa said he isn't a fan of rats in reference to an infamous incident at his Sydney hotel back in 2017 after an altercation with fellow fighter Fabricio Werdum, in which the Brazilian threw a boomerang. Covington was accused of calling the police. Werdum was fined $600 and charged with common assault, but claimed that Covington racially insulted him and attacked him first, suggesting a lot of his persona was an act. Both Tuivasa and Volkanovski took exception with how Covington acted on camera and off it. Then Tuivasa said he doesn't like people like that, to which Volkanovski added that he doesn't like the way Covington goes about these things, especially the thing with Masvidal. The pair doesn't understand how they went from friends to foes. This dynamic has put a bad taste in everyone's mouths, so they're all hoping Masvidal will dominate him. However, the both of them don't believe the two are a good match. After he was shown the video, Covington obviously couldn't resist clapping back. He wrote off the Aussie star's comments as irrelevant, even though Tuivasa is an emerging contender for the heavyweight title, and despite Volkanovski being the reigning featherweight champion. Covington told Fight Week that they're two irrelevant fighters trying to go off one of the biggest names in the sport right now. He believes they want to use his name to try and get some headlines because their fighting doesn't get attention in the MMA world. He clarified that he didn't call the police, but the hotel did because they were in the lobby. How did the feud begin? As Masvidal put it in an Instagram post, with Covington and Yoel Romero in 2015 for many years through, the two were best friends like family. Covington was kicked out of the American top team, with tensions between the pair at boiling point 5 years later. When Covington traveled to Brazil to fight Demian Maia in 2017, everything changed. After securing victory, he needed to do more to make a statement in the welterweight division, so he took to the microphone to call the Brazilian fans filthy animals and their homeland a dump. This was the start of a new persona for him, which is seen and widely condemned by the UFC community. The situation with Hernandez escalates. This isn't the end of the story. Brazilian fighters at ATT refused to train with him in protest, while the feud with Masvidal escalated after a pay dispute with his coach Paulino Hernandez after his comments. Once he became his full-time coach, Hernandez claims Covington agreed to pay him 5% of his purse, not including sponsorship money. After Covington's interim title fight with Rafael dos Anjos at UFC 225, that mutual respect and trust would be broken. According to Hernandez, Covington earned $350,000 from that fight and was said to have owed his coach $17,500, but only received $5,000. Covington had told him in advance he would not be paying his coach the full amount this time round, as Masvidal claims, leaving ATT owner Dan Lambert with no choice but to evict him. Covington would go on to publicly lash out at Masvidal and Dustin Poirier. Masvidal believes this dispute gave fuel to the fire that was his falling out with Covington. Next, Masvidal has doubts regarding the friendship from the start. Masvidal told MMA Junkie that the way he talked about his sister and his mother made him feel like he would want to distance himself from Covington. Ahead of his fight with Masvidal, Covington had continued to resort to personal attacks, calling him a deadbeat dad. He's called the allegations made by Hernandez and Masvidal fake news. According to Covington, who says the suggestion that Masvidal took him under his wing and mentored him back in the early stages of his career is just one of the many lies. He believes that Masvidal backstabbed him, and so this grudge match for him is super important. Covington speculated that because Masvidal didn't get the same amount of attention as he did in the gym, he turned his back on Covington. Masvidal and his teammates feel strongly about Covington and want to put an end to him. He's xenophobic, racist, and a lot of other negative things, which rubs everyone the immensely wrong way. Now in other UFC news, Joanna may adore fighting, but she admits that she makes more money outside the octagon. Just because she hasn't fought doesn't mean she isn't busier than ever these days, even though it's been 2 years since Joanna Jędrzejczyk last competed in the UFC. The former UFC strawweight champion still trains every day, with a burgeoning business empire being built at home in Poland, and since becoming one of the most recognizable names across combat sports, she's also juggling television appearances, endorsement deals, and other opportunities that have been afforded to her. Now she's really started to understand her worth inside and outside the cage. But Jędrzejczyk is still just as passionate about fighting as she was after first signing with the UFC back in 2014. She's super busy and she wants to make sure that everything is going in the right direction. She's currently training alongside her coaches at a American top team in Florida. She's also been very vocal about her current contract situation with the promotion as she approaches the end of her deal, but Jedrzejczyk is still anxiously awaiting an official offer from the UFC for her next fight. The strong working relationship with the UFC she's maintained doesn't diminish her desire to get paid what she's worth. Questions to do with why she would even bother returning to the UFC, because she set up a career for herself outside of it, which doesn't involve getting punched in the face for a living, is something that Jedrzejczyk is constantly bombarded with, solely because she has so many endeavors away from fighting. The 34-year-old veteran absolutely wants to compete again, but she's also smart enough to address the inadequacies in her paycheck when compared to her drawing power and fighting ability. Lastly, Makhachev has denied ever refusing the Dos Anjos fight. One thing that Islam Makhachev wants to make clear is that he'll go through anyone and everyone to prove that he's not to be taken lightly, as if his actions haven't already spoken loud enough, positioning him comfortably in line for the winner of May's title clash between champion Charles Oliveira and Justin Gaethje. Makhachev has won 10 straight bouts and only tasted defeat on a single occasion. Makhachev isn't worried about McGregor possibly sliding his way into the mix. Moreover, the Dagestani fighter sees himself capturing and defending the title before a run at 170 pounds. In the main event of UFC Vegas 49 2 weeks ago opposite Bobby Green, Makhachev's 10th straight victory out of his overall 22 came. In the bout that was originally supposed to see him square off with Beneil Dariush, Makhachev finished Green with strikes needing just 3 minutes and 23 seconds. A past booked opponent of Makhachev needed a fill-in of his own after Rafael Fiziev tested positive for COVID-19 this past weekend. Before negotiations eventually broke down, Makhachev stepped up to the plate, revealing his interest on Twitter. For the short notice meeting, Makhachev requested $1 million, as claimed by Dos Anjos. Makhachev said all rumors that he turned down the fight were false. He was on vacation in California when the news came out, so he ended up calling his manager to tell him to communicate to UFC that he was ready for the fight. However, UFC didn't agree to the conditions Makhachev had, so the fight didn't come to fruition. Makhachev now feels he's being looked at as the bad guy in a sense, because he admitted to wanting to help out fans and a big UFC card. Furthermore, he says he called the UFC himself to sort this out, even though he believed that Dos Anjos isn't quite on his level. Dos Anjos is a much older man, who isn't even a top 5 fighter. While he has no problem fighting Dos Anjos, the fighter was left wondering who he's going to end up fighting in order to secure a title shot. Poirier, Chandler, Hooker, Ferguson, and Gillespie were names that he spitballed but wasn't satisfied with by the looks of it. That's all for now, folks, but we will be back with more interesting videos. To stay informed about the MMA industry, keep watching our videos. Tell us what you think about Covington's comments in retaliation to what the Aussie fighters had to say about him by sounding off in the comments. And don't forget to like and subscribe before leaving. Signing off.